Allah's messenger, said, "While I was at Mecca the roof of my house was opened and Gabriel descended, opened my chest, and washed it with Zamzam water. Then he brought a golden tray full of wisdom and faith, and having poured its contents into my chest, he closed it. Then he took my hand and ascended with me to the nearest heaven. When I reached the nearest heaven, Gabriel said to the gatekeeper of the heaven, 'Open the gate.' The gatekeeper asked, 'Who is it?' Gabriel answered, 'Gabriel.' He asked, 'Is there anyone with you?' Gabriel replied, 'Yes, Mohamed the first is with me.' He asked, 'Has he been called?' Gabriel said, 'Yes.' So the gate was opened and we went over the nearest heaven, and there we saw a man sitting with some people on his right and some on his left. When he looked towards his right, he laughed, and when he looked toward his left he wept. Then he said, 'Welcome, O pious prophet and pious son.' I asked Gabriel, 'Who is he?' He replied, 'He is Adam, and the people on his right and left are the souls of his offspring. Those on his right are the people of paradise, and those on his left are the people of hell, and when he looks towards his right he laughs, and when he looks towards his left he weeps.' Then he ascended with me till he reached the second heaven, and he, Gabriel, said to its gatekeeper, 'Open the gate.' The gatekeeper said to him the same as the gatekeeper of the first heaven had said, and he opened the gate. Anas said, Abu Dhar added that the Prophet met Adam, Idris, Moses, Jesus and Abraham. He, Abu Dhar, did not mention on which heaven they were, but he mentioned that he, the Prophet, met Adam on the nearest heaven and Abraham on the sixth heaven. Anas said, when Gabriel along with the Prophet passed by Idris, the latter said, 'Welcome, O pious Prophet and pious brother.' The Prophet asked, 'Who is he?' Gabriel replied, 'He is Idris.' The Prophet added, 'I passed by Moses and he said, "Welcome, O pious Prophet and pious brother." I asked Gabriel, 'Who is he?' Gabriel replied, 'He is Moses.' Then I passed by Jesus and he said, 'Welcome, O pious brother and pious prophet.' I asked, 'Who is he?' Gabriel replied, 'He is Jesus.' Then I passed by Abraham and he said, 'Welcome, O pious prophet and pious son.' I asked Gabriel, 'Who is he?' Gabriel replied, 'He is Abraham.' The Prophet added, then Gabriel ascended with me to a place where I heard the creaking of the pens. Ibn Hazm and Anas bin Malik said, the Prophet said, then Allah enjoined 50 prayers on my followers when I returned with this order of Allah. I passed by Moses who asked me, 'What does Allah enjoin on your followers?' I replied, 'He has enjoined 50 prayers on them.' Moses said, 'Go back to your Lord, and appeal for reduction, for your followers will not be able to bear it.' So I went back to Allah and requested for reduction, and he reduced it to half. When I passed by Moses again and informed him about it, he said, 'Go back to your Lord as your followers will not be able to bear it.' So I returned to Allah and requested for further reduction, and half of it was reduced. I again passed by Moses and he said to me, 'Return to your Lord, for your followers will not be able to bear it.' So I returned to Allah and he said, 'These are 5 prayers and they are all equal to 50 in reward, for my word does not change.' I returned to Moses and he told me to go back once again. I replied, 'Now I feel shy of asking my Lord again.' Then Gabriel took me till we reached Sidrat al-Muntaha, low tree of the utmost boundary, which was shrouded in colors indescribable. Then I was admitted into paradise, where I found small tents or walls, made of pearls, and its earth was of musk. The mother of believers, Allah enjoined the prayer when he enjoined it. It was 2 rak'at only, in every prayer, both when in residence or on journey. Then the prayers offered on journey remained the same, but the rak'at of the prayers for non-travelers were increased. We were ordered to bring out our menstruating women and veiled women in the religious gatherings and invocation of Muslims on the 2 Eid festivals. These menstruating women were to keep away from their musalla. A woman asked, 'O Allah's Messenger, what about one who does not have a veil?' He said, 'Let her share the veil of her companion.' Once Jabir prayed with his izar tied to his back while his clothes were lying beside him on a wooden peg. Somebody asked him, 'Do you offer your prayer in a single izar?' He replied, I did so to show it to a fool like you. Had any one of us 2 garments in the lifetime of the Prophet? I saw Jabir bin Abdullah praying in a single garment, and he said that he had seen the Prophet praying in a single garment. The freed slave of Umhani, the daughter of Abi Talib, said, I went to Allah's Messenger in the year of the conquest of Mecca and found him taking a bath, and his daughter Fatima was screening him. I greeted him. He asked, Who is she? I replied, I am Umhani bin Abi Talib. He said, Welcome. Oh Umhani. When he finished his bath he stood up and prayed 8 rak'at while wearing a single garment wrapped round his body, and when he finished I said, O Allah's Messenger, my brother has told me that he will kill a person whom I gave shelter, and that person is so and so the son of Hubairah. The Prophet said, We shelter the person whom you have sheltered. Umhani added, and that was before noon, duha. One, Allah's Messenger said, the prayer of a person who does hadith, passes urine, stool or wind, is not accepted till he performs the ablution. A person from Hadramaut asked Abu Hurairah, What is hadith? Abu Hurairah replied, Hadith means the passing of wind. 2. Once I went up the roof of the mosque, along with Abu Hurairah. He performed ablution and said, I heard the Prophet saying, On the day of resurrection, my followers will be called Al-Ghurul Muhajilan from the trace of ablution, and whoever can increase the area of his radiance should do so, i.e. by performing ablution regularly. 3. My uncle asked Allah's Messenger about a person who imagined to have passed wind during the prayer. Allah's Apostle replied, he should not leave his prayers unless he hears sound or smells something. 4. Ibn Abbas said, the Prophet slept till he snored and then prayed, or probably lay till his breath sounds were heard and then got up and prayed. Ibn Abbas added, I stayed overnight in the house of my aunt, Maymunah. The Prophet slept for a part of the night, see Fath al-Bari page 249, volume 1, and late in the night, he got up and performed ablution from a hanging water skin, a light, perfect ablution, and stood up for the prayer. I, too, performed a similar ablution, then I went and stood on his left. He drew me to his right and prayed as much as Allah wished, and again lay and slept till his breath sounds were heard. Later on the Muaddin, call maker for the prayer, came to him and informed him that it was time for prayer. The Prophet went with him for the prayer without performing a new ablution. Sufyan said to Amr that some people said, the eyes of Allah's Messenger sleep but his heart does not sleep. Amr replied, I heard Ubayd bin Umar saying that the dreams of prophets were divine inspiration, and then he recited the verse, I, Abraham, see in a dream, O my son, that I offer you in sacrifice to Allah. 37.102, see Hadith number 183. 5. Allah's Messenger proceeded from Arafat till when he reached the mountain pass, he dismounted, urinated and then performed ablution but not a perfect one. I said to him, is it the time for the prayer, O Allah's Messenger? He said, the place of prayer is ahead of you. He rode till when he reached Al-Muzdalifah, he dismounted and performed ablution and a perfect one. The call for Iqamah was pronounced and he led the Maghrib prayer. Then everybody made his camel kneel down at its place. Then the Iqamah was pronounced for the Isha prayer which the Prophet led, and no prayer was offered in between the two prayers, Isha and Maghrib. 6. Ibn Abbas performed ablution and washed his face. In the following way he ladled out a handful of water, rinsed his mouth and washed his nose with it by putting in water and then blowing it out. He then took another handful of water and did like this, gesturing, joining both hands, and washed his face, took another handful of water and washed his right forearm. He again took another handful of water and washed his left forearm, and passed wet hands over his head and took another handful of water and poured it over his right foot, up to his ankles, and washed it thoroughly, and similarly took another handful of water and washed thoroughly his left foot, up to the ankles, and said, I saw Allah's Messenger performing ablution in this way. 7. The Prophet said, if any one of you on having sexual relations with his wife said, and he must say it before starting, in the name of Allah. O Allah! Protect us from Satan and also protect what you bestow upon us, i.e. the coming offspring, from Satan, and if it is destined that they should have a child then, Satan will never be able to harm that offspring. 8. Whenever the Prophet went to answer the call of nature, he used to say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-kabuthi wal kabith, i.e. O Allah, I seek refuge with you from all offensive and wicked things, evil deeds and evil spirits. 9. Once the Prophet entered a lavatory and I placed water for his ablution. He asked, who placed it? He was informed accordingly, and so he said, O Allah, make him Ibn Abbas, a learned scholar in religion, Islam. 10. Allah's Messenger said, if any one of you goes to an open space for answering the call of nature, he should neither face nor turn his back towards the Qibla, he should either face the east or the west. 11. People say, whenever you sit for answering the call of nature, you should not face the Qibla or Baitul Maqdis, Jerusalem. I told them. Once I went up the roof of our house and I saw Allah's apostle answering the call of nature while sitting on 2 bricks facing Baitul Maqdis, Jerusalem, but there was a screen covering him. Fath al-Bari, page 258, volume 1. The wives of the Prophet used to go to Al-Manasi, a vast open place, near Baqi at Medina, to answer the call of nature at night. Umar used to say to the Prophet, let your wives be veiled, but Allah's apostle did not do so. One night Sauda bint Zamla, the wife of the Prophet, went out at Isha time and she was a tall lady. Umar addressed her and said, I have recognized you, O Sauda. He said so, as he desired eagerly that the verses of al-hijab, the observing of veils by the Muslim women, may be revealed. So Allah revealed the verses of al-hijab, a complete body cover excluding the eyes. I went up to the roof of Hafsa's house for some job and I saw Allah's Messenger answering the call of nature facing Sham, Syria, Jordan, Palestine and Lebanon regarded as one country, with his back towards the Qibla. See Hadith number 147. Once I went up the roof of our house and saw Allah's Messenger answering the call of nature while sitting over 2 bricks facing Baitul Maqdis, Jerusalem. See Hadith number 147. Whenever Allah's Messenger went to answer the call of nature, I along with another boy used to accompany him with a tumbler full of water. Hisham commented, so that he might wash his private parts with it. Whenever Allah's Messenger went to answer the call of nature, I along with another boy from us used to go behind him with a tumbler full of water. Whenever Allah's Messenger went to answer the call of nature, I along with another boy used to carry a tumbler full of water, for cleaning the private parts, and a short spear, or stick. Allah's Messenger said, whenever any one of you drinks water, he should not breathe in the drinking utensil, and whenever any one of you goes to a lavatory, he should neither touch his penis nor clean his private parts with his right hand. The Prophet said, whenever any one of you makes water, he should not hold his penis or clean his private parts with his right hand. And while drinking, one should not breathe in the drinking utensil. I followed the Prophet while he was going out to answer the call of nature. He used not to look this way or that. So, when I approached near him, he said to me, fetch for me some stones for cleaning the private parts, or said something similar, and do not bring a bone or a piece of dung. So I brought the stones in the corner of my garment and placed them by his side, and I then went away from him. When he finished, from answering the call of nature, he used them. The Prophet went out to answer the call of nature and asked me to bring 3 stones. I found 2 stones and searched for the third but could not find it. So took a dried piece of dung and brought it to him. He took the 2 stones and threw away the dung and said, this is a filthy thing. The Prophet performed ablution by washing the body parts only once. the Prophet, performed ablution by washing the body parts twice. The slave of Uthman, I saw Uthman bin Affan asking for a tumbler of water, and when it was brought, he poured water over his hands and washed them thrice, and then put his right hand in the water container and rinsed his mouth, washed his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out. Then he washed his face and forearms up to the elbows thrice, passed his wet hands over his head and washed his feet up to the ankles thrice. Then he said, Allah's Messenger said, if anyone performs ablution like that of mine and offers a 2-rakat prayer during which he does not think of anything else, not related to the present prayer, then his past sins will be forgiven. This verse is, verily, those who conceal the clear signs and the guidance which we have sent down, 2:159. I heard the Prophet saying, if a man performs ablution perfectly and then offers the compulsory congregational prayer, Allah will forgive his sins committed between that prayer and the next prayer till he offers it. The Prophet said, whoever performs ablution should clean his nose with water by putting the water in it and then blowing it out, and whoever cleans his private parts with stones should do it with odd number of stones. Allah's Messenger said, if any one of you performs ablution he should put water in his nose and then blow it out, and whoever cleans his private parts with stones should do so with odd numbers. And whoever wakes up from his sleep should wash his hands before putting them in the water for ablution, because nobody knows where his hands were during sleep. The Prophet remained behind us on a journey. He joined us while we were performing ablution for the Asr prayer, which was overdue, and we were just passing wet hands over our feet, not washing them thoroughly, so he addressed us in a loud voice saying twice, save your heels from the fire. The freed slave of Uthman bin Affan, I saw Uthman bin Affan asking for a tumbler of water to perform ablution, and when it was brought, he poured water from it over his hands and washed them thrice, and then put his right hand in the water container and rinsed his mouth and washed his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out. Then he washed his face thrice and then forearms up to the elbows thrice, then passed his wet hands over his head and then washed each foot thrice. After that Uthman said, I saw the Prophet performing ablution like this of mine, and he said, if anyone performs ablution like that of mine and offers a 2-rakat prayer during which he does not think of anything else, not related to the present prayer, then his past sins will be forgiven. I heard Abu Hurairah saying as he passed by us while the people were performing ablution from a utensil containing water, perform ablution perfectly and thoroughly for Abul Qasim, the Prophet said, save your heels from the hellfire. I asked Abdullah bin Umar, O Abu Abdurrahman, I saw you doing 4 things which I never saw being done by any one of you companions. Abdullah bin Umar said, what are those, O Ibn Jurayj? I said, I never saw you touching any corner of the Kaaba except these 2, facing south, Yemen, and I saw you wearing shoes made of tanned leather and dyeing your hair with henna, a kind of red dye. I also noticed that whenever you were in Mecca, the people assume ihram on seeing the new moon crescent, 1st of Dhul Hijjah, while you did not assume the ihram. Ihram is also called ilal, which means loud calling, because a muhrim has to recite talbiyah aloud when assuming the state of ihram, till the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, day of Tarwiyah. Abdullah replied, regarding the corners of Kaaba, I never saw Allah's Messenger touching except those facing south, Yemen, and regarding the tanned leather shoes, no doubt I saw Allah's Messenger wearing non-hairy shoes, and he used to perform ablution while wearing the shoes, i.e. wash his feet and then put on the shoes. So I love to wear similar shoes. And about the dyeing of hair with henna, no doubt I saw Allah's Messenger dyeing his hair with it, and that is why I like to dye my hair with it. Regarding ilal, I did not see Allah's Messenger assuming ilal till he set out for Hajj, on the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah. That the Prophet, at the time of washing his deceased daughter, had said to them, "Start from the right side, beginning with those parts which are washed in ablution." The Prophet used to like to start from the right side on wearing shoes, combing his hair and cleaning or washing himself, and on doing anything else. Saw Allah's Messenger, when the Asr prayer was due and the people searched for water to perform ablution, but they could not find it. Later on, a pot full of water for ablution was brought to Allah's apostle. He put his hand in that pot and ordered the people to perform ablution from it. I saw the water springing out from underneath his fingers till all of them performed the ablution. It was one of the miracles of the Prophet. I said to Abida, "I have some of the hair of the Prophet, which I got from Anas or from his family." Abida replied, "No doubt if I had a single hair of that, it would have been dearer to me than the whole world and whatever is in it." When Allah's Messenger got his head shaved, Abu Talha was the first to take some of his hair. Allah's Messenger said, "If a dog drinks from the utensil of any one of you, it is essential to wash it 7 times. The Prophet said, "A man saw a dog eating mud from the severity of thirst. So, that man took a shoe, and filled it with water and kept on pouring the water for the dog till it quenched its thirst. So Allah approved of his deed, and made him to enter paradise." My father said, "During the lifetime of Allah's apostle, the dogs used to urinate, and pass through the mosques, come and go, nevertheless they never used to sprinkle water on it, urine of the dog." I asked the Prophet about the hunting dogs, and he replied, "If you let loose, with Allah's name, your tamed dog after a game and it hunts it, you may eat it, but if the dog eats of that game, then do not eat it because the dog has hunted it for itself." I further said, "Sometimes I send my dog for hunting and find another dog with it." He said, "Do not eat the game, for you have mentioned Allah's name only on sending your dog and not the other dog." Allah's Messenger said, "A person is considered in prayer as long as he is waiting for the prayer in the mosque, as long as he does not do hadith." A non-Arab man asked, "O Abu Huraira, what is hadith?" I replied, "It is the passing of wind from the anus, that is one of the types of hadith." My uncle said, "The Prophet said, one should not leave his prayer unless he hears sound or smells something." I used to get emotional urethral discharges frequently and felt shy to ask Allah's Messenger about it. So I requested Al-Miqdad bin al-Aswad to ask the Prophet about it. Al-Miqdad asked him and he replied, "One has to perform ablution after it." I asked Uthman bin Affan about a person who engaged in intercourse but did no discharge. Uthman replied, "He should perform ablution like the one for an ordinary prayer, but he must wash his penis." Uthman added, "I heard it from Allah's Messenger." I asked Ali Zubair, Talha and Ubay bin Kabi about it, and they, too, gave the same reply. This order was cancelled later on, and taking a bath became necessary for such cases. Allah's Messenger sent for an Ansari man who came with water dropping from his head. The Prophet said, "Perhaps we have forced you to hurry up, haven't we?" The Ansari replied, "Yes." Allah's Messenger further said, "If you are forced to hurry up during intercourse, or you do not discharge, then ablution is due on you." This order was cancelled later on, i.e., one has to take a bath. When Allah's Messenger departed from Arafat, he turned towards a mountain pass where he answered the call of nature. After he had finished, I poured water and he performed ablution, and then I said to him, "O Allah's Messenger, will you offer the prayer?" He replied, "The Musalla, place of the prayer, is ahead of you, in Al-Muzdalifah." I was in the company of Allah's Messenger, on one of the journeys, and he went out to answer the call of nature, and after he finished, I poured water and he performed ablution. He washed his face, forearms and passed his wet hand over his head and over the two socks made from thick fabric or leather. That he stayed overnight in the house of Maimuna, the wife of the Prophet, his aunt. He added, I lay on the bed, cushioned transversely, while Allah's Messenger and his wife lay in the lengthwise direction of the cushion. Allah's Messenger slept till the middle of the night, either a bit before or a bit after it, and then woke up, rubbing the traces of sleep off his face with his hands. He then recited the last 10 verses of Surah Al-Imran, got up and went to a hanging water skin. He then performed the ablution from it, and it was a perfect ablution, and then stood up to offer the prayer. I, too, got up and did as the Prophet had done. Then I went and stood by his side. He placed his right hand on my head and caught my right ear and twisted it. He prayed 2 rakat, then 2 rakat and 2 rakat and then 2 rakat and then 2 rakat and then 2 rakat, separately 6 times, and finally 1 rak'ah, the witr. Then he lay down again in the bed till the muaddin came to him. Whereupon the Prophet got up, offered a 2 light rakat prayer and went out and led the far prayer. I came to Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, during the solar eclipse. The people were standing and offering the prayer, and she was also praying. I asked her, what is wrong with the people? She beckoned with her hand towards the sky and said, Subhanallah. I asked her, is there a sign? She pointed out, yes. So I, too, stood for the prayer till I fell unconscious, and later on I poured water on my head. After the prayer, Allah's Messenger praised and glorified Allah and said, just now I have seen something which I never saw before at this place of mine, including paradise and hell. I have been inspired, and have understood, that you will be put to trials in your graves, and these trials will be like the trials of Ad-Dajjal, or nearly like it. The sub-narrator is not sure of what Asma said. Angels will come to every one of you and ask, what do you know about this man? A believer will reply, he is Mohamed, Allah's Messenger, and he came to us with self-evident truth and guidance. So we accepted his teaching, believed and followed him. Then the angels will say to him to sleep in peace, as they have come to know that he was a believer. On the other hand, a hypocrite or a doubtful person will reply, I do not know, but heard the people saying something, and so I said the same. A person asked Abdullah bin Zaid, who was the grandfather of Amr bin Yahya, can you show me how Allah's Messenger used to perform ablution? Abdullah bin Zaid replied in the affirmative and asked for water. He poured it on his hands and washed them twice, then he rinsed his mouth thrice and washed his nose with water thrice by putting water in it and blowing it out. He washed his face thrice, and after that he washed his forearms up to the elbows twice, and then passed his wet hands over his head from its front to its back and vice versa, beginning from the front and taking them to the back of his head up to the nape of the neck, and then brought them to the front again from where he had started, and washed his feet up to the ankles. My father saw Amr bin Abi Hassan asking Abdullah bin Zaid about the ablution of the Prophet. Abdullah bin Zaid asked for earthenware pot containing water, and in front of them performed ablution like that of the Prophet. He poured water from the pot over his hand and washed his hands thrice, and then he put his hands in the pot and rinsed his mouth and washed his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out with 3 handfuls of water. Again he put his hand in the water and washed his face thrice and washed his forearms up to the elbows twice, and then put his hands in the water and then passed them over his head by bringing them to the front and then to the rear of the head once, and then he washed his feet up to the ankles. My father saw Amr bin Abi Hassan asking Abdullah bin Zayd about the ablution of the Prophet. Abdullah bin Zayd asked for earthenware pot containing water and in front of them performed ablution like that of the Prophet. He poured water from the pot over his hand and washed his hands thrice, and then he put his hands in the pot and rinsed his mouth and washed his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out with 3 handfuls of water. Again he put his hand in the water and washed his face thrice and washed his forearms up to the elbows twice, and then put his hands in the water and then passed them over his head by bringing them to the front and then to the rear of the head once, and then he washed his feet up to the ankles. Allah's Messenger came to us at noon and water for ablution was brought to him. After he had performed ablution, the remaining water was taken by the people and they started smearing their bodies with it, as a blessed thing. The Prophet offered 2 rakat of the Zuhr prayer and then 2 rakat of the Asr prayer while a short spear, or stick, was there, as a sutra, in front of him. The Prophet asked for a tumbler containing water and washed both his hands and face in it and then threw a mouthful of water in the tumbler and said to both of us, Abu Musa and Bilal, drink from the tumbler and pour some of its water on your faces and chests. Mahmud bin Arabi, who was the person on whose face the Prophet had ejected a mouthful of water from his family's well while he was a boy, and Urwa, on the authority of Al-Maswar and others, who testified each other, said, whenever the Prophet performed ablution, his companions were nearly fighting for the remains of the water. My aunt took me to the Prophet, and said, O Allah's Messenger, this son of my sister has got a disease in his legs. So he passed his hands on my head and prayed for Allah's blessings for me, then he performed ablution and I drank from the remaining water. I stood behind him and saw the seal of prophethood between his shoulders, and it was like the Zir al-Hijla, means the button of a small tent, but some said egg of a partridge, etc. On the authority of his father, Abdullah bin Zayd poured water on his hands from a utensil containing water and washed them, and then with 1 handful of water he rinsed his mouth and cleaned his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out. He repeated it thrice. He, then, washed his hands and forearms up to the elbows twice and passed wet hands over his head, both forwards and backwards, and washed his feet up to the ankles and said, this is the ablution of Allah's Messenger.